Before we get to the review, I would like to state that this is a personal unit, and I have owned these for quite some time. I think it's in the middle of last year, so I got this for probably about a year. It's it's one of my most favorite headphone, period. So you'll probably know where is this review going. However, I'm not going to just totally shell on them. There are quite a few weaknesses that they have in even in their price range, that I would elaborate to you. But before that, I would like to ask a question. In this channel, a lot of our reviews are mostly surrounding IMs and in-ear monitors. We did a few headphones a while back. However, they are just few and far in between. A lot of IMs. And I would like to ask, which one would you prefer? Should I do a bit more headphones in the future, or just strictly IMs? Because for me, I am a bit more passionate. Honestly, I'm a bit more passionate in the headphone department, because I'm always a headphone person instead of IMs. I think they're just better, at least for my preference and how I use them. So yeah. Okay, for the TLDIs, these are a fantastic piece of audio equipment at any price range. This sounds phenomenal in their presentation, in their technical performance. These are very good. There are a few drawbacks in them. They are quite what I would like to say more of a warm, bright tuning. So they have warmer mid-range. However, the treble region is pretty bright. So I guess if you are very sensitive to treble, I don't think this is a good choice. It has a very unique way to present sound that is very difficult for other high-end planars or just any type of headphone to do, which this creates quite a substantial tallness to the sound that is quite difficult to replicate. So that's a TLDR. In this review, I'm going to first address this and everything surrounding the ARYA, and I'm going to compare the ARYAs with the HD800s I have right here, and also the LCDX, and also I'm going to compare these to the younger siblings of the HIFIMAN lineup, such as the Nandas and Sundaras, and a bit on the HE400Is, on the 4XX or the 400SEs, and I would elaborate why would you want to jump here, or why would you not want to jump to the ARYAs. So okay, let's get to the build quality. First of all, this is a fucking HIFIMAN, okay? Don't look for premium build quality and accessories if you're trying to buy HIFIMAN products. And that goes from the cheapest to the most premium HIFIMAN products. They don't feel premium. Even this as far as comparing those to something like the Abyss or something to the Focal Utopia, they don't feel as premium, and they don't look as premium as those probably, or even like the Verite Open. Those feels and looks very beautiful. So yeah, you only got a piece of cable. If I can actually find the cable here, it's an okay cable. It's covered in some type of paracord. It's better, it's much better than the cables you got from Ananda's. Those cables are an abomination. These is okay, these are pretty okay. Feels okay, it's kind of jank, though they serve their purpose well. I would much prefer them to just also include the XLR cable. This is quite a premium headphone and you want to run it from a premium amp. So XLRs would make a lot more sense, or just 4.4 Pentagon. That makes a lot more sense than not including them here. And it's also $1,600. So why is the question. This is the ARYA V2. If you haven't noticed yet, it has the new mesh. I don't know, some type of fabric mesh here instead of the aluminum or like the metal mesh in front of the drivers, and the pads are hollow. I guess they don't have the mesh attached to the pads. They are now attached to the driver, probably to prevent people from touching the driver. And they have an overall improved build quality in terms of feel and construction, because they actually, we can force the I forgot what these things called. Fuck. These things with metal, so I don't think they would break that easily. The paint seem a bit more premium. I don't know if they actually changed the paint. It just feels better. Maybe that's just the bias, I guess. And they also don't squeak like the older version. The older version used to nick and it's so fucking annoying. And yeah, because I actually owned the older version and they broke. They just the left driver stopped working after almost a year. Almost the last month of the warranty, like we got like 12 months of warranty, right? And at the very last month before the warranty expire, the left driver just popped and bye bye ARYA. And though their customer service and the post-purchase service is very good. I emailed them once and they would just say, oh, just send them to us and we'll give you a new one. And that's what they did. They gave me a new one, and the new one's V2, so profit, I guess. Even though I bought the previous ARYA second hand, they don't really care. They just hand out ARYAs. So yeah, and about amplification, these actually need a lot of power. It's not the HE6 type of power, the Sesvara type of power. These need sufficient power, but not. Maybe I would say the bare minimum would be something like this. This is the Topping A50s. This is a very good budget amp. I would much recommend these over the L30, because those things tend to destroy your headphones with them. So yeah, these are actually very good. These sound very linear, very clean sounding, and and with the linear power supply, even with the linear power supply plugged into them, they actually produce less power. However, it's small, it's minute, but it's noticeably cleaner sounding, and I think the trade-off is pretty worth it. And even with the less power from the linear power supply, it's strong enough to power the ARYA. Maybe at this, yeah, at about 12 or 1 o'clock in the dial. So very strong, tiny amp. So yeah, you would benefit, though. When I plug the ARYAs onto my Jotunheim 2, I do see a quite not as significant, because these are actually not that amp picky. These need the power. It gets moody and gets not as pleasant with low powered amp, low current amps. However, with high current amps and high powered amps, yeah, like the Jotunheim 2, or even the topping A50s, so these two actually don't produce that much difference in sound quality in the ARYAs, not as much as they would differ if I use a HD800, but I do notice subtle differences. For example, the dynamics definitely improved. These don't have the best dynamics, as you might know. So getting to the more powerful, the better amp is quite... it kind of helps. Okay, it kind of helps with that lack of macro and microdynamics. So yeah, using the Jotunheim, the better amp would result in better sound, but not as much as the HD800. So just look for an decent size, decent quality amp. I wouldn't recommend a topping A90 because they don't sound a lot different than the topping A50s, to be completely honest with you. I would just recommend the Jotunheim 2, and it kind of boggles me at how cheap the Jotunheim 2 is. It's $100 cheaper than the A90, and I have no idea why, because they sound noticeably better, in my opinion. So yeah, about the sound quality. Now let's get to the sound quality. For the bass, if you're looking for, if you're going to score, or you're going to evaluate the bass in the HIFIMAN ARYA, I would much recommend you to use a high quality and excellently EQ'd music, because a lot of the modern pop music, they actually have reduced bass instead of elevated bass. Not all of them, but a lot of them, because they need to compensate the crappy and shitty headphones or speakers that people are going to use with those type of music. The shitty bass boosted headphones, the shitty low quality headphones that people are going to use. Wink wink, Raycons, wink wink Beats. Not so much. It's not good if you're going to EQ the bass correctly there. So I would recommend you listening to actually a not so processed music, or something like Chesky, or something like more of the orchestral music or jazz music. They are usually tuned or like EQ'd or like mixed to be used by audiophiles, so I would much recommend those. So yeah, the bass here is deep, extends deeply to the sub bass using the correct tracks. These extend deeper than the HD800. These extends deeper than the LCD-X in the sub bass, and definitely extends deeper than Anandas or the Sundaras. They don't roll off like at all, and you would really notice that if you're playing instruments that need that sub bass emphasis, like acoustic bass, for example. It gives the acoustic bass a bit more body. However, the bass here is not very dynamic. It's different. It's not the type of punchy bass that surprises you with that type of air pushed to your ears. However, that quick snap through in your ears, it's a type of bass that rumbles and moves the air inside of the ear cups like this. So yeah, it's not the punchiest bass. It does have the planar slam, however it doesn't have the punch that or the dynamics, which you probably might prefer, it's actually much less punchier than the HD800s. So yeah, the mid-range, it's fantastic actually. It's very linear, it's very flat mid-range. It does have a dip in the 2K, in the 1 to 2K region. However, it's not as significant as you might think it would. It's actually sound quite agreeable and quite pleasant to me. Oh yes, there is a dip there. And the thing with the mid-range of the ARYA is it's actually quite warm for something. For a planar HIFIMAN. So yeah, it's quite surprisingly warm. In the first listen you might think it's kind of bright, but it's not really. Maybe the upper mid-range have a bit more emphasis right around the 3K region. Sometimes it might bother you, but in my experience it doesn't really bother me. Female vocals have a lot of body, however male vocals might... If you listen to primarily male vocals, with deep male vocals, I mean, I would just recommend you to gravitate towards the LCDX over the ARYA. However, if you listen to a lot of female vocals, the ARYA would give a more complete, or maybe just a mix of male or female vocals, or quite a brighter male vocals. The ARYA is fantastic at delivering that. And if you're looking for the HIFIMAN ARYA, I would bet like 99% that you've watched Joshua Valu's video on the ARYAs, because he's quite the ARYA shell. No, I'm just kidding. He talks about the ARYA a lot. And in the video, he mentions a lot that the ARYA, there's a sense of scale, and there is a sense of it presents vocals differently. Maybe if my take on that, it's the vocal sounds forward. However, they don't sound in your head. They sound in front of you. It's like looking on a paint, like. The vocal is like made of glass. It's not the fragile. It doesn't mean that it's fragile. It means that it's transparent. It's like looking on a stained glass. And the instrument is behind the vocals. It's like the instrument's also made of stained glass, and that's the characteristics of the vocals of the HIFIMAN ARYA. It's just transparent, and it's just there forward. It's with you, however it's not in you. Does that make sense? It's quite a bit in front of you, however not distant. It's not distant sounding like the HD800. It's there, it's looking straight at you, however it doesn't give you that feeling of you're the microphone, and it's not fatiguing like at all. It's in the proper, correct position for me, which is pretty fantastic in my opinion. Male vocals tend to sound quite a bit thinner, however, like deep male vocals. However, it's not that bad actually. It's actually pretty okay. However, the correlation and the fundamentals and the harmonics work better in female vocals rather than male vocals. That's what I found here in the ARYA. In instruments, they do have a very good tonal balance in general, so a lot of instruments in the mid-range do sound very natural. Except if you're going to go with the more upper mid-range and lower treble region, it might get a bit intense. Like electric guitars might get a bit intense here. Not so much, but might get a bit intense. So yeah, that's probably the trade-off of the tallness and scale of the size of the ARYA. Yeah, now with the treble region is actually not my favorite in the ARYA. I'd much prefer the treble region of the H800. So that's probably primarily because of, to me, I don't hear the peak of the HD800s. And in general, the treble region of the ARYA is brighter than the HE800s. So overall, the ARYA is brighter in the treble region, but it's contoured more properly, so it doesn't peak like the HE800. It just goes like bright and yeah, and like that. It doesn't peak at one spot like the HE800, but I don't hear that peak. So the problem, the treble of the HE800 is actually no problemo for me. So yeah, I guess that's that. It's detailed. It's not the most extended type of treble. I think using my younger audiophile ears, I do listen towards the upper end of the my ears are still capable to listen for about 19.5 kilohertz or something. That actually, these don't have the most extended upper treble. It doesn't have the most elevated energy in the upper treble region. I think the LCD-X is actually better than the ARYA in the upper treble region. It's not better, I mean it's more forward than the ARYA in the upper treble region. So yeah, surprisingly the ARYA has more sub-bass than the LCD-X, but less upper treble than the LCD-X. So that's actually quite something, I guess. Now with the technical performance, I would say that the ARYA is very good technical performance wise. The separation qualities of the ARYA is probably unrivaled at its price range. It has, because it has that nature of excellent separation of the planars very correctly. It has that type of planar nature, and has that stage, that widest and tallness of the stage to support it. It's not the widest stage. I think the HD800 is still the widest stage at this price range. The ARYA do have quite an advantage in terms of scale, in terms of tallness of the stage, and such in terms of deepness of the stage. It's quite excellent for the ARYA. It spaces the instruments better. So yeah, and it images. It's not as pinpoint as a lot of the dynamic driver, because dynamic drivers usually images very well. However, the ARYA is a bit more diffuse. However, it's still there. It's better. The image is better in front of you rather than laterally, if that makes sense. Detail retrieval. The detail retrieval in ARYA is one of their weaknesses. It's one of their Achilles heel, because these are not the most detailed. Surprisingly, these are not the most detailed. Surprisingly unsurprising. It's well below the HE800s. It's about equal as the LCD-X. The planars here don't sound as detailed. That I think that's a trade-off. It's very resolving in terms of compared to everything else under it. However, it's not resolving if you're going to compare it with the ARYAs, or you're going to go up to the Utopias, or because the HE the HE800s. If you're going to compare it with the HE800s, are going to scale it like above its price range. It's not the most detailed. In my comparison of the HE800, I mentioned that the detail is not that far off. It's if you're going to average all the music, it's not far off, because a lot of the crappy music don't actually gives you the information of how much detail you lost. You only notice the difference in detail between the ARYA and the HE800 is if you use a more well-recorded audiophile type of music, such as Chesky, or the more orchestral music. That is where you would notice the quite significant quality drop of the detail in the ARYAs if you compare them to the HE800s. For example, if I listen to the Phoenix Wright 2019 orchestral with the first and second song, and even those two first songs, you would notice the difference in detail between these and the ARYA. These and the H800s. The ARYA, while they present a lot of things very clearly, a lot of instruments very clearly, they don't actually resolve a lot of the subtle nuances of the recordings. It's not unresolving, definitely not unresolving, but it's well below what you can get in the HD800. So yeah, but in general music, top 40, like more modern music, you wouldn't even notice it. And also the other weakness of the ARYA is the macro and microdynamics, and it also, while it doesn't really appear, it doesn't really you wouldn't really notice it. You probably would notice it actually if microdynamics, you wouldn't probably notice it in a lot of the modern music. However, with orchestral music and well recorded music, you would really notice it, especially in orchestral music, because when you first, let's define what I see as macro and microdynamics. Because the definition of macro and microdynamics always differ depending on any of who you're asking. And I'm not going to say which one is the most correct, but I'm going to say which one is my definition of macro and microdynamics for context with this video. Imagine if you have a straight comb. How long is the comb? That's macrodynamics. And how much the teeth of the comb is microdynamics. So macrodynamics is more of, in general, the dynamic range. How quiet is the sound? How quiet the sound can be and how loud the sound can be. At least that's for me. However, the microdynamics is how much gradient, how much gradient can you have? It's like, is it from 1 to 7 dB? For example, there's a 1 and 7 dB jump. Does it go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or it goes 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and so on until they reach 7 dB? And you do notice it when music goes from quiet to loud gradually, instead of that they just jump. If they just jump, probably that's a macrodynamics you're going to really see. Or like bass impacts, does it hit as hard? It's more akin to the macrodynamics. However, microdynamics, it would be much easier for you to notice it in music that gradually grows louder and louder, and that's usually more in the orchestral type of music. So yeah, if you listen to a lot of that type of recordings, I personally think the HE800 is better for that. For the what do you call it? Yeah, I guess that's it for the ARYA. Let's get to the strict comparisons. Okay, just for the first headphone, I just put this away. The HE800s. In my opinion, the HE800 is quite similar in terms of how they present the sound, but they are different in how they deliver them. If that makes sense. First of all, they both are warm, bright headphones. What? These are warm? These are but by warm, bright, I meant these have warmer mid-range because they have quite a recessed upper mid-range and thicker lower mid-range. However, they have a brighter treble. I think that's the easiest way for me to explain both headphones. Here, they're both warm, bright. They both have their treble issues. They both have quite expansive stage. So yeah, they both have good bass. They both are quite detailed, however not so much in the ARYAs and probably more to the H800s. Well, the difference is the ARYA presents music like you're looking at a lot of stained glass, like in front of you. You'll see the stained glass behind the first stained glass, but you need to look through it. So it layers details very well, the ARYA. It layers details better than the H800. The H800 is kind of like when you see just like a painting. It's easier to notice details in a painting or with just one picture than than if the picture is layered like a stained glass, and then ultimately you would retrieve more detail here. However, the separation and the presentation of the especially in the vocals, is much more unique and pleasant in the ARYAs rather than the H800. The timbre of the ARYA, I haven't gotten the timbre of the ARYA. It's quite better than the Nandas or the cheaper HIFIMAN headphones. It doesn't have that total dryness to the sound. It does have a bit of the planar dryness, however, not so much. It's kind of a bit thicker, however, than surprisingly, than probably the HIFIMAN and then the H800s. It's just quite a bit, maybe, or not so much, I guess. Yeah, and the vocals in the H800 can sound distant and not engaging. The ARYA still have that quality of a very palatable vocals. It's a very pleasant presentation of vocals, in my opinion. And you don't see that in the HD800s. The macro and microdynamics, the HD800 is quite better than the ARYA. However, for the instrument separation, it's still noticeable that the ARYA is better than the HD800. So yeah, and the music in the HIFIMAN ARYA is quite a bit more defined. What do I mean by that? It's, imagine you're playing an RPG game, and the outline of your character is more, it's more thicker. You would notice that character easier than if they are thinner they have thinner outline. Imagine the ARYA is you increase the thickness of the outline, however the HD800 is you increase the resolution of the game. So it's much more well defined as a character in the ARYA. However, it's much more detailed and resolving in the HD800. So yeah, that's how instruments are presented, are delivered between these two headphones. For more information about the comparison, you can get to the video where I do compare these. And you can see LCDX, it's quite a yin and yang type of differences. First of all, the LCDX is much thicker sounding. This is the older version. Actually, I actually compared these with the newer 2021 version. I will get to that in the full LCDX review, and why I actually prefer the older version instead of the newer version. And that's mostly because of personal preference on how I purchase headphones. These are thicker, these are a bit more imbalanced sounding, I guess. It's not as balanced as the HIFIMAN ARYA. It does present more type of thicker timbre. It has better timbre, it's more natural timbre than the HIFIMAN ARYA. It's much better built quality wise. It's way heavier, of course, and however it presents sound quite similarly, planar like, which means it has great separation and layering. However, it's not as wide, not expansive, not as deep as the ARYA. So yeah, detail retrieval is pretty similar. They actually complete each other. If you're going to listen to more of a jazz music, classical music, orchestral music, I think the ARYA is much better. For more metal, rock music, or like a lot of more modern pop music, like, or EDM, I would much rather listen with the LCDX. So they actually complete each other. If you're gonna get 2 headphones, getting both of these is actually quite good, especially if you can get them for a bargain. Should you upgrade to the ARYA? I would like to give you tell you my experience with upgrading to the ARYA. I actually, before the ARYAs, the only plane I had was the 4XX, and I love the ARYA so much, the 4XX so much, that I would just jump to the ARYAs. And thank God I jumped the ARYAs. If I didn't jump to the ARYAs, I'd probably waste a lot more money, because I would need to buy the Sundaras, and I'll need to buy the Anandas, and then eventually I'll just buy the ARYAs anyways, because these are better than the Anandas or the ARYA and the Sundaras, especially in my opinion. Because the Anandas and the Sundaras, however, even though they are agreeable in their tuning, more agreeable, their technical performance is just not up to par to the ARYAs. The ARYA is slightly brighter, however, it's much more resolving, it's much more correct in the timbre presentation, it's much less intense, it separates music better. It's probably quite as wide laterally as the Sundaras. It's much wider than the Anandas. However, it's much deeper and taller in the ARYAs. The Sundara is kind of like the 4XX type of tuning of soundstage. I mean. So, if you think that you're going to upgrade eventually, just buy the ARYAs. If you don't think that you're gonna do that, or if you've listened to the 4XX and you think, oh, the timbre here sounds wrong, I don't really like it, I want the dynamic drivers, then don't buy the ARYAs, because even these have noticeably better timbre than all of those much lesser, cheaper planar headphones. It still doesn't completely lost its planar timbre. It's still, at the end of the day, it's still a planar headphone, a gigantic planar headphone at that. So yeah, if you're going to look for a thicker type of timbre, maybe go for the Abyss or the Odyssey lineup. I guess that's it for the review. Don't forget to watch Jason's video. This is a longer one. Holy shit. See you next time. Godspeed.